These are the books that I read in September and October, and I would like to do a little wrap-up video and talk about my experience reading these books. This is gonna be super candid. As you can tell behind me, there's kind of a lot going on here, so we're actually moving soon. I have sold my bookshelves. I'm going to be buying new ones, and so I took all of my books off my bookshelves to move them. And so yeah, this is just gonna be a very casual, candid wrap-up video. I'm just gonna chat with you like we're best friends at coffee about these books that I've read recently and that I'm really excited about. Let's just go ahead and get into it and start talking about all these books. There's 12 books here. They're not gonna be in any particular order. So the first book that I read was My Grandmother Asked Me to Tell You She's Sorry by Frederick Bachman. This has been on my TBR for a little while now. I bought this, I think, like early summer this year, and I bought this ever since I read Anxious People by Frederick Bachman, which was my first Frederick Bachman book, and I absolutely loved Anxious People. I was crying. It just like hit home, and just his character development and character work is incredible. And just knowing, like watching the Man Called Ove movie and just like kind of knowing the way that he writes, I knew that this is going to be just as special, and it was so good. I didn't really connect with the characters as much as I did with Anxious People, but I did really enjoy this. I even put in one little baby tab, which I don't really tab my books, so that's kind of like saying something. It was for this quote right here. Elsa has checked dysfunctional in both places, and it means that something is not quite functioning as it's supposed to, which is one of Elsa's favorite things about her granny, which this whole story is basically following a relationship between a little girl and her grandmother. And her grandmother is like this wild thing, this wild person who just like loves to go out and explore. She doesn't care about social norms. She just does whatever makes her happy. She travels the world. She's really smart. She's a doctor, and she's like helped and saved people's lives and doesn't like brag about it or broadcast it at all. So she's just like this amazing person, and she has this granddaughter, and we're in the little girl's point of view, and she's like this really smart, intelligent girl who has a lot of personality, and she goes through a lot of things within her life, like her daily life, and you get to kind of like follow her as she's discovering things about her grandmother. I won't go into too much detail because I think it's just special just to unravel his stories as you go. I just remember feeling just wowed by like his way that he perceives the world and perceives humanity, and it is just absolutely touching. I just loved it, and you just learn a lot kind of like about yourself as you're reading this, and really any of his books, you just learn a lot about yourself, and I think that's just like what is so special about his writing style. I would recommend this to absolutely anybody. It was an absolute fantastic read, and I'm excited to keep going through his books. I just recently bought My Friends, and I really can't wait to read that book either, so I think that's gonna be my next one that I read by him. I don't know where to put these anymore because my whole life is like off kilter right now. Scoot these over. The next book that I read, I think these actually were in the same video. Spinner Wheel reading challenge video, I think. So this is Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands. This is the second book in a cute little fantasy, like cozy fantasy trilogy that is following Emily Wilde, who is a researcher of fairies. I think it's called, there's like a word for it, druidologist, I think. I might be wrong, but I think that's what it is. Yeah, so this book, I actually liked this book more than I even liked the first one. This one just had like a little bit more like interest and action, and it's very similar in the vibes as the first one, where they're in a European like landscape, and they are in these woods, and they're studying these fairies, and you meet all these cute little fairy creatures and these mean fairy creatures, and you learn about like the lore behind them and the history behind them as Emily Wilde is studying them to write her encyclopedia. Of course, she meets a man along the way who's like a scholarly rival of hers, but they end up having a romance, and a whole bunch of things happen that you find out about this guy, and that just continues in the second book. And like I said, I feel like it was even better than the first one. And in this one, you get a different type of landscape, but you get a lot more of the fairy lore and of our main male main character's background. So if you've read the first one, you kind of know what I'm talking about. So yeah, I love this very much. This had so much more action in it and kept my interest so much more than the first one. This was like a solid 4-star, I think, and I have the third book and I'm excited to read it, but I'll probably wait more towards like spring, summer, because it's a very spring, summer book. The next book I read was Child of Shivay by J.R. Cathers. This book is good. This is like a solid 3.5, 4-star for me. This is a fantasy romance that's following our female main character, which I forgot her name. What's her name? Ari. And this is a very interesting book. This is very fae coded, very like fairy coded, but it's not like what I pictured it would be by looking at this cover and kind of hearing the descriptions and stuff. I was going into it expecting more of like an Éowyn and Aragon, Elven like love story, and that's not really what it was. This is very much more like your stereotypical indie fae romantasy read, which is not a bad thing at all. I love a good fae romantasy, but I feel like I have read something very similar to this. I did really enjoy it. It was very fun. I got through it pretty quickly, and I just thought that like it was unique in the sense of like the plot and everything. I got her name wrong. It's actually Shivaria, but I think her nickname is Ari. See, and that's kind of like the thing about this book, unfortunately, is I really enjoyed it while I was reading it, but I've clearly like forgotten a lot of the points and stuff, and I feel like that means that it didn't really stick with me long term. And that's really unfortunate to say because I loved this book. This author is a sweetheart. I really enjoyed talking to her, and I ended up actually getting this book on accident in the physical copy before it was even released. So I really enjoyed this book and the experience of like discovering it and reading it, but it wasn't anything like mind-blowing or like world-changing for me. I still think it's a solid 3.5, 4-star romantasy. I think a lot of people would really enjoy it, but it still feel like I need a little bit more. And I think that we might get that in the second book, whenever that might come out, which I don't know when it's planning on coming out, but I did really enjoy it. It was good. You deal with a lot of he's training her and assassins and like badass female main characters and like female empowerment. Found family is definitely a big one in this one. And yeah, it was just overall really fun, really good, but I need a little bit more. So I'm hoping that the second book just gives me that little extra piece of like connection with the characters. The next book that I read, I actually read this recently. This was on my November TBR, but I ended up reading it early in October because I did a little switcheroo with my TBR, and I'm so glad that I did because this book was amazing. This is The Mad Wife by Megan Church, and I had never read a Megan Church book before. And I originally saw this because I had gotten the ARC on NetGalley, and so I had it on my Kindle. I just didn't get to it, and then it was released and I saw it in person at Barnes, and I ended up picking it up and reading it right away. This is basically following a 1950s housewife as she struggles with postpartum depression. In these years, postpartum depression really wasn't like formally diagnosed, not really something that was well educated on or fully understood, and these women are being judged, as they always are, based off of this sickness that nobody really knows anything about, and treated like they're crazy and they needed to go into a psych ward. And there's a lot of these like really scary treatments and stuff that were performed on these women during this time, and just because this disease wasn't fully understood. And this book really just like explores that, and in a very heavy way. There's a little paragraph in the beginning of this book that basically says, this book is a heavy book. It's a very heavy topic, and if it's something that is too much for you or becomes too much while you're reading it, it is okay to put it down and to revisit later on and to take a break and like really wrap your head around it. And I think that's really important to read and actually hear before you go into this book, because this is a heavy book, and you're in this woman's mind as she's navigating all of these things, and you find out a little bit like of a mystery at the end, which opens your eyes to what she's really been going through and what she's really been dealing with that she wasn't even fully aware of. And it's just really important, and I'm really happy that books like this are out there for people to read, because I think it will really just open the eyes of people and start discussions of things that need to be discussed, and more openly and more commonly, and just for women to be understood more, honestly. And so yeah, I'm really happy that I read this. This was an absolutely 5-star read for me. I would recommend this to most people depending on like what they're looking for, and I think it's a really important read. A really good book. I loved it. If you love children and books, you would love this book too. The next book that I read, oh my gosh, The Second Death of Locke. This was such a phenomenal little book. I want to get like a special edition of this book. That's how much I really loved it. So The Second Death of Locke by V.L. Bovolino is such an interesting little dynamic here, and not something that I've ever read in the past. So you're following a well, who is our female main character, who is a knight, and she's a knight protecting and like assigned to protect this mage who's the male character. She is a well, which basically means she helps magically support and give energy to this mage's magic, and they're like bonded, and he takes her energy for his magic. That's the only way he can really like use it effectively. And so she's fighting to like protect him, and they go into these wars together, they work together. Of course, they're like lifelong best friends, and they grew up together, and there's like this underlying love, but neither one of them know how to communicate that to each other. They don't know if they both like each other. The yearning and like the tension between these characters is just on par what yearning and tension needs to look like in a book, and it's just so tasteful and develops so nicely, and you're not waiting too long, but you're waiting just enough time for it to all like come around. And it was just such a fun read. And underlying or overarching, there's this whole plot of this cool magic system that has something to do with magic being tied to a land and a person, or like the family name that resides on this land or island, how our main characters are connected with that. And it's just really cool. There's a lot of lore, a lot of like history of the magic, and it's just really fun. And I flew through this book, and it was just super fast paced, and I was so invested in the love and the romance dynamic. It was just so good. Loved it. 5-star, honestly, maybe even a 6-star. Like, this made it onto my ACOTAR and Throne of Glass shelf. So I think that just speaks for itself. That's the kind of book that like I couldn't stop thinking about when I finished it, and wished that I had much more time like with the characters. Like, I wish I had like a 10-book series with those characters. The next book that I read was Of Blood and Aether by Harper Hawthorne. Now, this book has been on my TBR for a really long time. This was super hyped up, like maybe last year, the year before last year, like super hyped up in the little Instagram bookish girl community. And that's what made me want to read it originally. And I just kept pushing it back until finally I like committed to reading it. And I had a fun time. I can remember the things that happened in this book, and I can remember the dynamic. And thinking back on it, I probably would give this like a 4-star. Like kind of like I said with Child Shivay, it's not really something that I've never read before. You know what I mean? So basically, you are following this girl, female main character, who is accepted into this academy where she is going to learn how to use her magic. And she is kind of like the underdog, but she's hiding some things, which in reality makes her like the best of the best. And we learn that early on, that she's kind of like hiding her abilities and just trying to like act like she's a normal person, but she's really not. When she gets accepted into this academy, she meets this guy, kind of like tall, dark, and handsome, like player, cocky kind of guy, who sees her from across the room. They lock eyes, they both are attracted to each other, and it kind of just like goes from there. And this whole book is kind of like about their dynamic, and it's really fun and entertaining, and I love their banter and just kind of like their relationship that they build and friendship at the same time. It was really fun to like follow along and entertaining, like I said. But the like overarching plot was kind of just like it kind of just like fell by the wayside for me. And so what kept me in this book was the romance, not necessarily the plot development. And so I'm curious if in the second book we're gonna get more of that plot development. I have no idea when the second book's gonna come out, if it's even like planned or being written or anything. I haven't really looked into it. I think if you're looking for just a really fun, kind of spicy, romantic-y romance book, then this is definitely a good one for that. But if you're looking for more like plot heavy, not necessarily like the most in-depth, this was a solid 3.5, 4-star also, and it was fun, fast-paced. I finished it really quickly. I'm pretty sure it's on Kindle Unlimited. So yeah, that's kind of like all I really thought of this book. So the next book I read was Wild Reverence by Rebecca Ross. I have an entire reading vlog on this book as I read this one and my experience with it. So if you are curious for more like info and my thoughts and stuff on it, definitely go read that blog. It's my last free little library vlog because I found this in a free little library, which is crazy. But yeah, so Spoiler, I really, really liked it. It was really good. This book is like the epitome of a yearning, yearnful, young love book. If you didn't know, this is actually a prequel to the Divine Rivals Divine Rivals duology, which I really enjoyed the first book. I really didn't love the second book. But after reading this one, it kind of helped me understand more of the second book and kind of tie it in, and overall gave me like a better rating for the second book. But yeah, so this is all about like following the gods and this young girl who's a goddess, and she falls in love with a mortal boy, and their story and their love story and their romance. And there's a lot of history and wars between things that you learn between the gods and the humans and stuff, and it's just like really interesting and really fun. And this is a pretty thick book, and I got through it pretty quickly while I was going through some like life things as well, so that speaks volumes like with how much I really enjoyed this book. So yeah, solid like 4.5, maybe 5-star book. The next book that I read was an e-arc of this beautiful book called Maneater by Alexandra Tran. Now, this was a e-arc that I received by Alexandra, and I originally requested this arc because the cover is so unique and interesting and just drew me in. This girl, just like, whoever did this artwork is just, I love every bit about it. And so yeah, that's why I originally requested it. And I would say the inside matches the outside 100%. This book was so dark and creepy and gothic. So basically this is a fantasy with a subplot of romance, and it is kind of in this world that's kind of like creepy and gothic with like these dark woods, and you're following this girl who has a lot of questions and mystery behind her. And she ends up like being able to have this relationship with like ghosts and demons and stuff that most people don't have. There ends up being a little bit of a romance that we find out towards the end that things aren't exactly the way that you thought they were or what she thought there was, and she has to kind of like accept that or decide otherwise. So it was a really interesting book. If you're looking for something that's like kind of creepy and dark vibes, then I think that this would be a good option for you. I think it's really interesting, really unique, definitely not anything that I have read in the past, and you have like demons and stuff, which is like very interesting, and I really enjoyed it. This was definitely like a solid 4-star for me, for sure. The next book that I read was My Death by Lisa Tuttle. I loved this book. This was so creepy, but also so interesting. And I don't really want to even like give any preface of like what it's about, honestly, because that's what made it so fun and so special to read. It's very short. I think it's like just under 100 pages. You're following this woman who is an author, and she is awed by another historical author who is still alive but older, and she ends up going and traveling to interview her and finds out these weird twisty things as she is going about interviewing her in her travels and stuff. So it was definitely really interesting, definitely a perfect like fall moody type of book, like very atmospheric. And yeah, I really loved it, and I do want to find more of Lisa Tuttle's books and like get a little bit more into her writing, because I really loved this little taste of her writing. Then I read In the Veins of the Drowning. I read this very recently. This is by Kaylee Cassidy. This is One Dark Window, but make it sirens. It's very moody and gothic, involving like the ocean and sirens, and like the hunting of sirens, and the sirens' relationship with the humans. And basically you're following this girl. She was adopted when she was young by this king who hates sirens and hunts them, and basically treats her really poorly, like basically abuses her physically and verbally, and is forcing her to do all these things that she doesn't want to do. And you eventually see her meet this guy who comes to the castle, and he ends up taking her away from this old king, and they go to his kingdom, and he helps her basically like separate herself from this old king. I finished the book, really liked it, but it's not one that like I really thought too much about after. And I'm not sure if that's just because it's something that like feels like something I've already read before with the whole dynamic, or if it's just the situation where I was reading it. I was like on an airplane and like traveling and stuff, or if it was just the book itself. But we are going to be getting a second book of this, and I am interested in reading the second book 100%. Like, I'm very excited. I also just realized that Rachel Gillig reviewed it on the top here, and I keep comparing it to One Dark Window. But yeah, it's very much like One Dark Window, but make it like sirens and ocean lore and stuff like that. Overall, I think that this is a really, really good book. I think that if you're new to fantasy romance, you would love this book and eat it up. I think that if you've read a bunch of fantasy romance books, I think that it would still be pretty interesting, but you might have read something very similar to it in the past. Overall though, really enjoyed her writing style. It's very fast paced. I was never bored, and I did have a really fun time. There was one point where I was like, it felt a little insta-lovey, or like the romance and the like spicy stuff kind of like came out of nowhere a little bit, but I was enjoying it so much that I didn't even really care. So yeah, this was a really good book. I'd say solid 4-star. Also, I'm really glad that I read it. The next book that I read is A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. This book has been on my TBR for a very long time, and I finally read it and got it off my shelf. And I'm happy that I read it, because now I know, you know, what it's all about. But it was definitely a slower read for me. I listened to it on audio to try and just like get through it a little bit easier, and I don't know, it was just okay. I would recommend it for somebody who's looking for this type of book, because this is more of like an urban style setting, and that's not typically what I'm like going for. I don't usually love urban style stuff as much. I don't know. I don't usually go for contemporary style settings. But this was a really good read for the fall time. It's very much like fall atmosphere. You have this like vampire witch dynamic, and so this vampire is like thousands of years old, and he's very gentleman-like, and he's very romantic, and a lot of the gestures and stuff that he does for our female main character are like so sweet and swoon-worthy that it just, I was definitely giggling a lot with some of the things that he was doing and saying, and like he was like low-key touch her and you die, but make it like, you know, old school and super romantic. So yeah, I had a fun time. I just like wasn't super interested in the plot, I think. So that's kind of where it lost me, because this is a long book. This is like 500 pages, but I did like it. I enjoyed it. It was like a 3-star. And then the last book that I want to talk about is Juniper and Thorn by Ava Reed. This book, I'm so surprised, was like a 3.5 or 3.6 rated on Goodreads, which I think it should be rated higher than that. This is a super quirky, short little, what is this? Like almost 300 page book about two sisters who live with their wizard of a father who loves them, but like in his own way. And this book has such like weird twisty things that happen. It very much reminds me of reading like a T. Kingfisher book, where it's just like things are super off the wall and like weird, but it works. And this was a perfect read for like October. One of the sisters, you're in her point of view, and she's struggling because she's not, oh, I'm sorry, it's 3 sisters. She's not like the pretty one. She's not the popular one. She's kind of like the ugly sister out of all of them. And like kind of like the weird one that, you know, boys don't really like her as much as her sisters, and her and her dad are like pretty close, but there's like this weird relationship with them where like she doesn't even know if he likes her or not. And her dad is like always threatening to like turn them into like animals, and threatening to like, they can't leave the cottage because they'll go and like get ruined by like the outside world. But they end up sneaking off together. All 3 of the girls sneak off together and go watch the show, and our female main character ends up seeing this like really handsome dancer in the show that they watch, and ends up like really liking him, and then they end up meeting, and the rest is history. And this was just like really fun and quirky, and I loved it. I think a lot more people should read it, and I think it was just like really, yeah, just like really fun. There's a lot of just like funny traditional magic. Things just didn't really make sense, but it was funny, and it like made sense that it wasn't supposed to make sense, if that makes sense. But yeah, it was really fun. I loved it. It reminded me a lot of like reading T. Kingfisher. So if you love her writing, then I think you should definitely at least give this a try. And this was my first Ava Reed book, and I did really enjoy her writing. It was very just easy and flowy, like easy to read and digest. And the book like moved really fast. I think I read this in like 24 hours. So yeah, super fun book. Definitely one to read in like the October spooky season for sure. Yeah, those are all of the books that I read in September, October. There was one other book that I read that was an e-art called Pantomime, which has recently been published. She's the author of Dragonfall, if you guys have read that series. I haven't, but I read Pantomime, really enjoyed it. It was like 4.5 stars, a big surprise for me. Kind of like has this trans like underlying plot where our main character is trans, is like trying to like break free and like, you know, live in a world where that's not fully accepted, and then ends up going into a circus and like finding her people. And yeah, it was really good. Really enjoyed that book too. But yeah, those are all the books that I read in September, October. Thank you so much for letting me talk about them, and I will keep you guys updated on our moving and how that's looking, and hopefully, you know, we can get everything settled. And I am so excited for moving content and getting this book room and all that stuff settled. So yeah, thank you guys so much for being here. I hope that you've had a wonderful week and a wonderful weekend, and I will see you guys next Saturday in our next video. Bye guys.